Yellowstone National Park is home to a variety of geothermal features, including geysers and hot springs. These features are caused by the presence of a supervolcano beneath the park. Yellowstone is also home to a large number of wildlife species including bison, elk, deer, bears, wolves, and coyote. There are even some animals here that can't be totally explained, as evidenced by the hundreds of reports that are said to exist. Reports of a creature that shows itself and then disappears. The park's history goes back thousands of years. It was originally home to Native American tribes such as the Crow and Lakota. The first European Americans to visit the area were members of the Lewis and Clark expedition, who arrived in 1806. Yellowstone ultimately became a national park in 1872, when President Ulysses S. Grant signed the Yellowstone National Park Protection Act into law. Today, Yellowstone is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the United States, with over 4 million visitors every year. But if you're planning on visiting, there are a few things you should definitely know. First, always be aware of your surroundings and be cautious of wildlife, which can be unpredictable. Second, remember that geothermal features can be dangerous, and never touch the water or get too close to one of those features. Finally, make sure to stay on the park's designated paths and trails so you don't disturb any of its sensitive ecosystems, some of which contain things that can't be explained. Susan has been a park ranger at Yellowstone for going on 10 years. She recently reached out to us, wanting to share some of what she's seen. This is her story as she told it to us. Hi, Lilith. As a park ranger, I often encounter strange and dangerous creatures. Usually these are animals that we all know, but there are also times when I come across something that I can't explain. I know it may sound weird, but I've gotten used to these unusual occurrences, and I understand that they're just part of the park. I've also learned to just continue on with my duties and not be disturbed. I mean, the truth is that reports of large animals covered in fur and walking on their hind legs aren't uncommon in Yellowstone. Not all staff hears these stories, but those of us who do have mostly learned to take them in stride and just continue on with our work. But the story I feel compelled to share with you here was different. The day started when I was on a routine patrol of the park and I came across a pack of wolves off in the distance. Wolf packs are my favorite animals to watch in Yellowstone. They're so beautiful and graceful that I decided to stay and observe them for a while. And this day they were far enough away that I was able to watch them but still remain safe. At first, I was excited to see them and watch their interactions, but then they started to behave oddly, not like I've seen them in the past. They were looking around as if agitated, and then the alpha wolf seemed to take notice of me. It stopped to take a good long look, and then began to stalk me. It wasn't long before the others followed suit. Now, this was a very unusual situation for an animal to stalk a ranger, or anyone for that matter, and I had to use all of my training to get myself back to the safety of my vehicle to keep from being attacked. I knew that wolves can be timid. Well, maybe not timid, but they will back off if they realize you can harm them. So I decided to try and scare them off. I started making loud noises and waving my arms around, making myself look big. It worked. The alpha wolf eventually backed down, and then the others followed suit. Thankfully, I was eventually able to scare them off completely and continue on my patrol. But that's only the beginning. That wasn't the only strange encounter I had that day. Later that same day, I came across a herd of bison. Normally they are gentle creatures, but this herd was behaving erratically too. I noticed that they were acting angry and chasing something, and I noticed what appeared at the time to be a large bear running from them. I didn't think much of it then, but later, when I was writing up my report for the day, I realized that multiple people had seen similar encounters. Basically, they had seen animals acting strangely and behaving in ways that didn't make sense. Something strange was definitely going on in Yellowstone that day, and I intended to pay extra close attention to all of the wildlife the next day to try to notice if something was out of place. In order to do this, I intended to tap into all the training I had undergone at orientation, learning about the many different aspects of the job. At orientation, not only had we learned that we would be responsible for educating visitors about the park, enforcing park regulations, and performing search and rescue operations as needed, I also learned about the many different animals that live in the park. I learned about their habits, how to identify them. I also learned about the dangers they pose to humans and how to avoid being harmed by them. I even had the opportunity to go on a few wildlife patrols where we observed the animals in their natural habitat, which gave me a good sense of what was normal and natural. In part, thanks to my training, my next day at work, I was able to instantly realize that there was a strange current in the park that day too. Something was happening that was out of the ordinary, and it was making the animals act erratic, like in a way an animal will act when a predator is around, scared and agitated. Most animals that I saw that day were agitated, and many of the herd seemed to be either chasing something or running from something. At first, I assumed that it was just a large predator like a bear, but after further investigation, and after talking to other rangers, I realized that something else was going on. Something else was making all of the animals act strangely. And then, that's when I saw what was causing all of the problems. That's when I had my encounter with the mysterious creature. It was some sort of large, hairy animal. I first spotted it running from the bison herd, and it was unlike any animal I had ever seen before in person. At first, all I could see was a blur of fur as it ran through the trees, but then I managed to get a glimpse of it. It looked like it had 4 legs at first, but what I realized is that it only had 2, and it was running on those back 2, while its long, powerful arms swung at its sides, steadying it as it ran. The creature's head was large and round, with small, beady eyes that were set close together. Its mouth was open, revealing large, sharp teeth, and its tongue lolled out of its side of its mouth. It had a long snout, like that of a dog or a wolf, and its fur was matted and dirty. I couldn't believe my eyes as I stared at the creature. I'd never seen anything like it before in person, and I didn't know what to make of it. Was it some sort of new animal that had never been seen before? Or was it something else entirely? Something supernatural, perhaps, or hybrid. One thing I did know was that all of those reports I had heard of were true. I didn't have time to think about it for long, though, as the creature suddenly turned and looked right at me. Our eyes locked, and I could see the intelligence in its gaze. It knew that I had seen it, and it didn't seem happy about it. With a loud snarl, the creature ran off into the woods and away from me. I followed it for several minutes as it weaved in and out of the woods, watching it dart through different herds, all while I was trying to get a better look at it. It seemed almost like an elusive fox or coyote, but obviously much larger and much more powerful. And unlike other creatures in Yellowstone, this one had very thick fur. It looked thicker than most. I was most intrigued by the creature that I forgot to be afraid, but then my instincts kicked in, knowing the history of the past reports of a creature just like this. I immediately knew that I had to report this sighting. I radioed into the ranger station and told them what was going on. They were just as intrigued, but also just as worried as I was. And then 2 more rangers came out and met me at the area where I had seen the creature. We began combing the woods to try to find it, or try to find any sign of it at all. We drove our vehicles all through the back roads and woods, scanning for clues, but we came up empty-handed. It seemed like it had just appeared and then disappeared into thin air, popping up all over this section of the park and terrifying the native animals until it saw me. But I was left feeling more confused than ever. Where had it gone? Despite my best efforts and everyone searching for the next few weeks, we never did see it again. No signs of it at all. It's obvious that it knows the depths of this park, and it knows where to hide. Whatever the case may be, and wherever it is, one thing is clear. There is still much about nature and our world that we don't understand. And every day there are new mysteries to be discovered. I believe that there are animals that exist in this world that we have never seen before. I really do. And Yellowstone might just be home to one of them. Well, at least one, but likely more. Now, when I ride around in my vehicle, I always keep my eyes peeled for any sign of that creature. I know that it's out there somewhere watching and waiting. And I have a feeling that it will show itself to me again someday. Who knows? Maybe one day it will let me get a better look. But until then, I'll just have to be content with the memories I already have. Do you believe in the existence of such a creature? Have you ever had an encounter with something similar? I would love to hear your story. Yellowstone was established as a national park in 1872, making it the first national park in the United States. The park is located primarily in Wyoming, though it extends into Montana and Idaho as well. Yellowstone spans an area of over 2 million acres, and it is home to a diverse array of wildlife, including bison, elk, grizzly bears, and wolves. The park is also home to the geyser known as Old Faithful. It's a popular tourist destination with over 3 million visitors each year. Since its founding in 1872, Yellowstone has been a popular destination from tourists all over the world. However, despite its natural beauty and diverse wildlife, the park is also home to many strange and unexplained phenomena. Over the years, there have been numerous reports of encounters with mysterious creatures lurking in the darkness of Yellowstone's forests, as well as sightings of other strange and unexplained phenomena such as unexplained lights, strange noises, ghosts, and a wide array of uncategorized creatures. Whether these inexplicable encounters are real or simply the result of overactive imaginations remains a mystery to many people. But for those brave enough to venture into Yellowstone's wilds, it is clear that something very strange lurks within its borders. Perhaps one day, the stories behind these strange encounters will finally be revealed. But for now, the only certainty is that there is indeed something very strange happening in Yellowstone. One such story came to us from an insider at Yellowstone, a park ranger named Tom. He writes, "It's my 3rd season as a park ranger at Yellowstone National Park, and I actually do love it. I've seen some unbelievable things in my time here. Wolves, bears, even bison. I'm one of the lucky ones who gets to work in the park every day and watch the beauty and even watch the unexplained unfold. I was actually born and raised out here in the West. There's no place I'd rather be working than Yellowstone. The area is truly my home, and the park has been my passion for as long as I can remember. During school, we visited the park every year, and that's what solidified my love of the great outdoors. But despite all my love for Yellowstone, there are some things about it that still scare me. I'm not talking about the usual things like bears or snakes. No, the things that scare me are the strange and unexplained things that have happened here over the years. But even on a typical day, my job is never boring. There's always something new and exciting happening in Yellowstone. Just last week, I helped rescue a lost female hiker who had gotten lost in the backcountry. for 3 days, and she was running out of food and water. I was able to get her back to safety, checked out physically, and sent her on her way. And I was really proud of that. Those are definitely the rewarding parts of the job. Luckily, the other rangers in this park are also of similar stock. We're like a big family, always there to support each other. I basically know that no matter what happens out there, they are always ready to help out. Any one of us is always ready and willing to jump in wherever and whenever needed. Anyway, on the particular day in question, I was on my way to the station when I got the call. It was October of 2015, and a group of 3 hikers had gotten themselves lost on the north side of the park, and a ranger was needed to get out there and help them find their way back. So I and another ranger quickly headed over to the north side, to the area where they were reported to be, and we started looking for the hikers. It took us several hours, but we finally found them huddled together at the base of a cliff, shivering and exhausted, totally spent of all their energies. I quickly got to work assessing for any injuries and helping them get warm as soon as possible. Luckily, none of them seemed to have anything seriously wrong other than a few cuts and bruises, but their mental state was definitely not good. The hikers were terrified when we found them because they had been lost for hours and they had no idea where they were. They were also exhausted and cold, and they had started to worry that they would never find their way back safely. I quickly assessed that they were dehydrated, and that was starting to play with their minds. So we handed each of them some water to bring their bodies back and their minds back to better clarity. One of the hikers was still white as a ghost, though, and he started explaining how they had come across this massive creature while hiking. A creature with glowing eyes and long, sharp claws. He said that it had chased them, and they were terrified that it might still be out there somewhere, which is why they huddled down together and didn't move. I tried to calm the hikers down and reassure them that they were safe now. I explained that while some animals in the park can be dangerous, they didn't have anything to worry about now that we were there to lead them back to safety. I secretly wondered if the hiker had just seen a bear or something, but I didn't want to keep talking about it or ask any questions since they all seemed to be so terrified still. The hiker, named Phil, continued to describe the creature. He couldn't stop talking about what he had seen and described it as being about 7 feet tall, with a long snout and dark fur. He said that it was standing upright and looking at him intently. He continued to talk about how the creature smelled like rotting flesh, which seemed to be hard for him to even say. He couldn't understand how such a thing could exist, and he was convinced that he had been seeing a ghost or some other type of spirit. He was really out of it, so cold and scared that it almost seemed like he was hallucinating. He explained that when he saw the creature, he felt a sense of dread and fear. He described it as if he was surrounded by darkness, and said the forest felt like it was swallowing him up. The trees seemed to be alive to him and watching him, and he could hear strange noises coming from all around him. He went on to explain that the creature stood there for maybe 30 seconds, but then slowly turned and walked away into the darkness. Phil and his friends didn't know what to do or where to go. They were lost, cold, terrified, so they just sat there until they heard my voice calling out to them. After hearing their story, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease myself. I mean, I've heard it all while working here. Even stories like this, which sounded like they had seen something truly horrifying and unique in the park. Of course, I didn't mention to them that these things have been known to show themselves. I just reassured them that they were safe now. But it was getting dark fast, and we still had a long way to go back to the ranger station, so I wanted to get them moving. Despite not wanting to venture back onto the trails, I finally got them up and back to the ranger station, where I got them warmed up and fed. They were so relieved to be safe, and they thanked me over and over. We filed a report of the incident, but there wasn't much else we could do. I couldn't help but wonder silently to myself what it was that they had seen out there in the darkness, or if this thing would show itself again. I was pretty confident it would, but I kept my mouth shut. Honestly, I kept thinking that Phil and his friends were lucky to have made it out alive. While I don't know if they really saw anything that night, I do know that being lost in the cold in Yellowstone can be terrifying and really dangerous. The elements alone are harsh enough to kill you. Again, this wasn't the first time I've heard of this type of encounter in the park. I've been a ranger here for years, and I've heard stories from other rangers too about similar encounters. It's basically an unsaid thing between all of us that these things exist, but we don't talk about it openly. There's no doubt that there are some strange and dangerous creatures living in Yellowstone, but that's what makes it such an interesting place to work. You have to be a special person to deal with all that Yellowstone can throw at you. And despite being terrified by this encounter, I remain fascinated by the wildlife and natural wonders of the park. It's truly a special place, even if it's for reasons that not everyone knows.